Hi, I'm Griffin Dunne. Been asked to find a letter to read to you guys. And I've been thinking, what is sort of relevant in an abstract or direct way to the time we're in right now, which got me thinking about isolation, which is where I have been, what I've been doing in upstate New York, where I am right now. And it got me thinking about writers who must be very good at isolating well before the world changed, and the discipline it takes to isolate and put your thoughts down. And around that same time, while cleaning out my house, I came across a box of letters that go back decades. And I found some letters from my father, who is the writer, novelist, and journalist Dominick Dunne. That's him right there, actually. Um, and his letters to me in 1980, when he was not a novelist, journalist. He was struggling to find his voice as a writer. And so he was struggling to find his voice as a writer. And let Mary go while I'm talking here. And so he, at that time in 1980, 79 and 1980, self-isolated, self-exiled. He had lost all his money. He'd lost his employment as a television and movie producer, and he struggled with alcohol. And he got in a car and drove from Los Angeles to where it broke down in Oregon in front of a cabin. And that's where he lived, and that's for a year. And that's where he taught himself how to write. And these are the letters I came across. I'm going to conflate two of them, but it's about writing. It's about a guy trying to find his voice in an isolated environment, in a cabin, without a phone, without a television, and just him trying to find his voice. Dear Griffin, I had some absolutely terrible weeks after I came back here in the writing department. I could not get a word out of me. Well, the good news is that period seems to be about over. I started to write again yesterday. Another thing that makes it so hard for me is that my expectations from myself exceed what the reality is. Anyway, I went back to AA. There's a town about 14 miles from my cabin called Sisters, population 760. They have a weekly paper called The Nugget, in which I saw an AA announcement of a weekly meeting at the Lutheran Church. I'm not really sure why I was so impelled to go, but I was, and I went. It had nothing to do with wanting to drink. I really think I went looking for desperate people, as in the old stick with your own kind theory. And where better than at AA to come upon the same? There were only about 8 people, and they just sat around a table and talked. There weren't any speeches like there usually are. They told what happened to them from the last meeting to this. One lady lost her job as a dispatcher at the police station, and when she told her husband, he hit her, and then she smoked a joint. They all had stories like that. Almost all of them had slipped that week. I felt so at home with these people that when the chairman said to me, Dominic, do you have anything you'd like to say? I started talking, and I couldn't stop. I suppose in my whole life, I never told so much about myself to anyone as I did to that group, 2 of whom were Indians from a reservation. I suppose I figured, what the fuck difference does it make? I don't suppose I was ever so vividly aware of how compartmentalized my life is. And the headline of each event came out of me. Griffin, I had them spellbound. It was like I was giving a performance, but I wasn't sure if I was or not. I told them all my poor stories that I'm too ashamed to tell anyone else. And they were in hysterics, tears rolling down their cheeks. Then I talked about your mother and the guilt I felt about it. It was like I needed them and they needed me. It was as if delineated as I have ever been about myself. It was as if everything I have learned about myself in the solitude of this cabin over these months came into focus. And when I finished, they clapped for me. Not just AA polite clapping. They really clapped. I can't tell you how lovely it was. Had a good cry too. And the next day, I started to write. The point of that is that we are in charge of our own lives, and for some reason, the answer to which the point is that we are in charge of our own lives, and for some reason, the answer to which difficult is more difficult than it need be. Griffin, I know there is within me a talent to write. It is a purity at my root that got lost in the shams of my life. When I was a little boy, 4 or 5 and 6 almost, I was an enchanting little creature who used to spellbind adults with talents of fanciful things. Adults other than my parents, that is, especially my father parent. In the name of Irish Catholic manhood, he imitated and mocked and beat that little boy for his own good, until the only way for survival was to lose track of his identity. My hope is that I'm going to meet up with that little kid again, right up here in the North Woods. And he did.